Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was an infinite stratus. I just want to say enjoy the video, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you will know when I upload a video. And please support the author of the story, link is in the description below. Now with that out of the way, enjoy the video. Chapter 1 is Infinite Stratus, a machine that changed the world. They were first developed for space exploration. Designed by Tabane Shinano, they possess technology and combat capabilities far more advanced than any other weapon system, thus threatening to destabilize the world. So, the world created the Alaska Treaty to solve that problem. All existing is technology was distributed evenly around the world and even became a much-watched sport. The most surprising thing about it was that it could only be piloted by women. It has been 2 years since that fateful day. We come to a large building that is surrounded by wide fields that could be used for testing. At the front gate of the complex is a sign that reads Konoha Industries. This was a small, family-run, development company. They are known for their contribution to the programming of the PIC, passive inertia control. At this time, they are working on their design of Zaku, a mass production model that they wish to sell to every government. Suddenly, a loud sound is heard from inside the complex. Soon after, voices fill the air in anger, but if you listen carefully, you can hear laughter. Naruto. A woman voice yelled as an 8-year-old boy ran across the grounds. He had spiked, blonde hair that was the color of the sun, striking blue eyes, and 3 whiskers-like marks on each cheek. He was laughing his head off as he ran, so proud of his prank. This was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the son of Minato and Kushina Namikaze, the lead engineers and owners of Konoha Industries. He spent most of his time there and only left the complex when his parents left. He was a very curious boy and loved to play pranks. This is why he was running at full speed, hoping to escape punishment. "Can't catch me, slow pokes." He yelled back at his pursuers and laughed, only to run into something hard and metal. He fell to the ground, and looked up. Standing over him was his mother Kushina, piloting the prototype Zaku. It was a dark red, the shoulders were rounded with spikes, the legs and arms were slime, connected with a cable. Lastly, the black rounded thrusters sported hooks on the sides that held a shield and a blaster rifle. Naruto, she said, emphasizing each part of his name. She was a tall redhead with green eyes and a lovely smile. She looked at her son with anger. She slowly lifted him off the ground and lifted him to her eye level. "What is the grand idea behind that prank?" "To make the workers prepared for anything," he said sheepishly. "No, not that," she said with a sweet smile, that made the boy cringe. He tried to come up with an excuse, but Kushina wouldn't have any of that. "Not a word," she hissed, and lifted off with him hanging by his collar. She soon landed in front of the lab and sets him down in front of a tall man with sun-kissed blonde hair and striking blue eyes. This was Minato Namikaze, Naruto's father. He was a very smart and determined man. He was the main programmer and engineer there. The Zaku was his design, and he had a hand in every part of it. He looked at his wife, then back at his son. He knelt down and looked his Naruto in the eye. "Naruto," he said. Naruto looked down, not wanting to meet his eyes. "Look at me," he said. He gave him a small frown, making Naruto frown as well. "Why did you line the break room with orange paint bombs?" he asked his son, but was met with silence. "Naruto, why did you do it?" Naruto mumbled something that Minato couldn't hear. Minato replied with a stern look. Naruto sighed and looked at his feet. "I was bored," he said finally, as Minato looked at him with disappointment. "If you're bored, you could help me with making the new blaster," he said looking at Naruto. "You can't prank the employees whenever you feel like it." Naruto just nodded and looked at the ground, trying not to cry. Minato looked at him and sighed. He pulled him into a hug and held him close. "It okay," he said, "just next time, come to me first when you get the urge to prank someone." Naruto nodded and was sent to his room. Minato sighed and stood next to Kushina, shaking his head. "That boy has too much time on his hand for his own good," he said. Kushina nodded in agreement. "Yes, he does," she said, "but he was like me when I was his age." Minato pulled her close and smiled. "But he's ours," he said and kissed her. Kushina kissed him back and smiled. "Yes, he is," she said, then gave him a stern look. "Now, I'd love to stand here and kiss you all day, but we have an to build, so, back to work." He nodded and started walk towards his workstation only for Kushina to smack his butt. She gave him a wink and walked away giving an extra sway to her hips. That woman, Minato said and smiled. SB. It was a few days after the prank. Naruto and his dad were in the lab putting together a new thruster attachment for the Zaku. They were both having a great time, enjoying this father and son project. It seemed that Naruto understood his programming and engineering more than he did any other subject. He was always coming up with unorthodox ideas that they could use to improve the IS. Some of them had even been incorporated into the Zaku design. The pair worked quietly when, suddenly, a rumble shook the lab. Naruto fell down from his chair he was standing, only to be caught by his father. You okay, kiddo? He asked Naruto, who just nodded and smiled. Yeah, I am fine, Naruto said with a smirk, but soon it became a frown. But what caused me to fall? I don't know, Minato asked with concern. He set Naruto down and patted him on the head. Stay here, I will go and check it out. Okay, Naruto said, getting back up on his chair to begin working again. Minato smiled at his son. He's going to be a great man when he grows up, I just know it. Minato looked at Naruto once more before heading out to the main area. Soon the sound of shouting and gunfire filled the air. He quickened his pace and entered the security booth at the entrance of the lab. He watched the camera screens and his eyes went wide. They were under attack by 3 IS. Many of their security personnel were lying on the ground, wounded or dead. He turned to see what else was happening, when he saw a red blur strike one of the attacking IS. It was Kushina, flying the prototype, Red Zaku. She had her shield out and brought her axe down onto the attackers. The assailant tried to block the strike, but took the brunt of the hit, making her fall back. Kushina flipped back and put her axe back in her shield and summoned her blaster rifle. She began to fire at the enemy, causing them to scatter. 2 of the enemies rushed her and engaged her in battle. Kushina dodged blast after blast while returning fire at the same time. Minato couldn't find the third invader and began to switch through the camera angles, only to see her flying towards the lab. Damn, he said, and rushed back into the lab. He activated the automatic security turrets that were mounted outside on the walls. The enemy is dodged the continuous fire, but soon began to destroy the turrets one by one. Minato knew that the guns would all soon be destroyed. He activated one of the mechanical lifters and equipped it with an experimental blaster they had been working on. He lifted it up and looked around only to watch the lab bay doors burst open. He opened fire at the IS, only for it to dodge. She fired back and disabled the legs of the lifter. Minato jumped out and ran towards the inner lab. While this was going on, Naruto was still working on the rifle. He heard the sound of gunfire and looked around. He slowly got down from his chair and walked towards the door, peeking around it. He saw his father running towards him and heard the sound of engines close behind. Before he could ask what was going on, Minato ran in and closed the door. Naruto looked up at his father and saw the panic in his eyes. Naruto was getting scared. Dad, what is it? He asked, and Minato looked down at him. It's nothing, he said and began to lead Naruto towards the IS vault, but I need you to stay in the vault for a while. Naruto looked at him with confusion. Why? Naruto, just do as I say, Minato said, not wanting to deal with his son's attitude at the moment. No. Not till you tell me what is going on. Naruto replied, and stood in his place. Minato shook his head in frustration. They didn't have time for this, the door would only keep the IS out for so long. He grabbed Naruto and picked him up, while watching as the lab doors exploded inwards and the enemy IS flew inside. Naruto eyes widened as he watched the IS float in the air. Dad, why is there an IS here? He asked, as Minato stood frozen in place. Minato didn't answer but abruptly broke into a dead sprint towards the vault. The IS pilot saw the pair and flew towards them. Minato reached the vault first and threw Naruto inside. The boy rolled across the ground and rolled into the other prototype Zaku. Minato quickly closed the vault, sealing Naruto inside. Naruto got up and ran to the door. Let me out. He screamed at the top of his lungs, while banging on the door. He looked around and then noticed the view screen that displayed the outside the vault. Naruto inside. The boy rolled across the ground and rolled into the other prototype Zaku. Minato quickly closed the vault, sealing Naruto inside. Naruto got up and ran to the door. Let me out. He He screamed at the top of his lungs, while banging on the door. He looked around and then noticed the view screen that displayed the outside the vault. The vault could only be opened from the outside, so the screen was installed in case someone ever got locked in. They would be able to see who was outside and use the intercom system to get help. His eyes widened as he looked at the scene before him. His father was standing in front of the main computer console and the pilot of the IS was out of her machine, pointing a gun at him. Naruto activated the intercom to hear what was going on. Move. The pilot said with authority, but Minato didn't move. No, he stated, I won't let you take the designs we worked so hard to create. That not up to you. She stated. Minato charged and she fired. She missed while his shot hit her in the face. She stumbled back, but he continued his attack. He punched her in the stomach making her double over then kneed her in the face. The pilot was dazed, she didn't expect him to have some combat training, but before she could think of anything else, she again, was punched in the face. Minato watched as she fell to the ground, unconscious, from the assault. He sighed and let his guard down. Naruto cheered as his father walked towards the vault. Naruto saw another IS fly in and head towards Minato. Naruto tried to find the button to activate the two-way intercom but couldn't find it. Dad, look out! He screamed, but no one heard him. Soon the sound of a gun was heard and Minato fell to the ground, blood spilling out of his body. The second pilot walked over to his bleeding form and looked down at him. Why? You, he said as he turned to look at her. She looked down at him with a blank look on her face before shooting him 3 more times. She looked down at him for a few more moments before heading over towards the computers. She quickly uploaded the blueprints and picked up the knocked out IS pilot on the ground. She walked out of the lab not looking back. Naruto watched the entire time, tears streaming down his face. Dad, he said through his tears, and curled up into a ball. Tears streamed down his face as he lay down on the ground. Kushina was tired. She had fought with the other IS and lost. A hit from behind resulted in the Zaku losing all power. She watched as they flew towards the lab. Coming out of the Zaku, she had just enough time to watch the 3 IS fly off into the night. She put her Zaku in standby mode and ran towards the lab. She walked in and looked around. A broken lifter was seen laying, in a heap, on the floor. Burn marks were strewn all over the walls. She walked towards the inner lab and looked inside. A glance at the floor revealed a pool of red. Oh no, she said, and followed the blood. She looked down and saw Minato laying there in his own blood, the life gone from his eyes. She knelt down next to him and held him in her arms. Tears streamed down her face over the death of her husband. As she looked around she saw a small frog wallet left on one of the work tables. She looked around for her son, then looked at the sealed vault. She set her husband down and stood up, the blood all over her legs and arms. She walked to the vault and put in the combination to open it. The door slowly opened with a hiss. She stepped inside and saw Naruto laying on the ground curled up in a ball. She assumed the worst but was relieved when she saw the body move. She moved quickly over to her son and pulled him into her arms. Naruto felt someone pull him towards them and turned his head and saw his mom. He looked at her and started to cry into her chest. He stammered, they killed him. She held her son close as he cried, while her own tears mixed with his as the two souls cried over their loss. 8 years later. Naruto, get out here please, Kushina said as she entered the lab area. It has been 8 years since the attack on the complex and it seemed everything had gone back to normal. Kushina looked for her son because he was late for school once again. Ever since that night, he had thrown himself into learning everything about IS, and how to protect oneself. His goal was to one day to fight with an IS so nothing like what had happened 8 years ago, would happen again. He was currently working on the new design he had come up a year ago. He had worked on it constantly, but didn't allow anyone else to see the designs. She walked deeper into the lab, heard a loud crash, and saw a small red blur run past. Naruto ran past and saw his mom out of the corner of his eyes. Hi mom, he said, as he ran past. He turned a corner and saw a small fox with 9 tails standing at the end. This was Kyubi, his pet fox. He had found her a year after his father's death, half dead. He nursed her back to health and she had been with him ever since. In her mouth was a pair of designs Naruto was working on. Come on now, Q, Naruto said sweetly. I need those designs, so just set them down and no one gets hurt. Kyuubi looked at her owner and snickered. She turned, gave him a tail wave with all 9 tails, and ran. Damn fox, Naruto said, and ran after her. Kushina watched in amusement as Naruto chased Kyuubi around the lab. A few minutes later Kyuubi stood at Kushina's feet, looking up at her. Her eyes saying, pick me up. Kushina smiled and picked up the small animal, stroking her fur. Naruto stood in front of her, panting. Good, you caught her, he said with relief. He went to reach for the design, only to have his hand smacked away by one of Kyuubi's tails. Hey. She has the right idea. Kushina said looking at her son, you need to get out of the lab and socialize. I socialize enough. He replied. Calling part makers doesn't count, Kushina said with a giggle, also, you're late for school. Naruto looked at his watch and his eyes bugged, ah crap. He said and ran back to his lab, grabbed his backpack and ran towards the door. Q, let's go. The fox jumped out of Kushina's arms and gave her a nod of thanks before running after her owner. Kushina sighed and shook her head. She headed into the main lab and looked at the researchers. They were working on a new mass production model called the Strike. The main point was to have it able to change equipment mid-flight similar to the Raffle Revive. This was another invention made to switch weapons during flight. The major difference was that with the Strike, you don't just re-equip one weapon, you re-equip an entire weapon system. If you wanted larger firepower, you equipped the Launcher Strike. This was a pack that had major firepower. It was equipped with a large blaster that could be used for sniping or as a shotgun. On the shoulder were missile launchers. Next was the Sword Striker. This was a more close combat oriented. It was equipped with a large sword and a beam boomerang. Finally, there was the Ale Stiker. This was the default mode of the Strike. It was equipped with a blaster rifle, shield, and beam saber. They had made a prototype that performed quite well and it seemed they would soon be ready to present it to the world. Well, back to work, she said, and walked towards the main office. Later that day, Naruto was speeding down the road towards home. He was riding an orange and black motorcycle with Kyuubi, resting in his backpack. He was glad to be headed home. He wasn't a big fan of school, it just didn't fit him at all. He could tell you the ins and outs of but English class was a foreign concept to him. So, he was headed home to work on his personal design. He planned to reveal it when the others revealed the Strike, but first he had some fine-tuning to do. He pulled into the complex and flashed his access card. He parked his bike, and headed towards his lab. He entered the lab and went towards his work area. He punched in the code and headed inside. As he set his bag down, the main light came on. It was as he designed. It was called the Freedom, it was based on the Strike basic frame, but with his own design. Its legs and arms were slimmer than most allowing for more movement in blocking and attacking. Attached to the hips and shoulders were 2 blaster cannons. The thrusters were blue and black, and opened like wings. It was equipped with a blaster rifle, a double-sided beam saber, and a shield. Many didn't use a physical shield due to the energy shields it was equipped with, but Naruto would rather be safe than sorry. As he ran his hand over the metal of the he smiled. Soon, my friend soon, he said with a smile. Kyuubi looked at him and gave him a look like he was crazy. He looked at the fox and sighed, now, don't give me that look. Kyuubi turned around and gave him a wave of her tails. Naruto looked at the fox and sighed, you really need to stop, and you're just as bad as mom. Kyuubi looked at him and raised an eyebrow, I will date after I finish, happy. The fox looked at him for a moment before nodding. Naruto shook his head and sighed, setting to work. He was trying to improve the thruster output so he could get it to go faster. He started his computer and smiled as the system booted up. Time to have fun, he said with a smile, and started to type. Naruto became so absorbed in his work he failed to notice the time, and soon the day was almost done. Kushina walked in and set down a bowl of ramen, the aroma of the food pulling him from his work. He turned and walked over to her with a smile. Dinner time already, he said with surprise. How time flies. Kushina looked at her son and nodded. Yes it does, now eat, she ordered, and he did as he was told. Soon the bowl was gone only to be replaced by another. This went on for a while before a stack of 7 bowls stood on the table. Naruto patted his stomach in satisfaction and sighed. Thanks mom, he said with a smile. Kushina looked at him and pulled him to his feet. Time to train, she said. Naruto smiled. He had been training in martial arts, guns, and other armed ways of combat since he was 9. He felt that if he could defend himself he could have helped his dad and he would still be alive today. So he followed his mom through the training building, stopping in front of the gun locker. He pulled out his key and pulled out a 9mm pistol, M16 assault rifle, State Route 45 sniper rifle, and finally, a Sega shotgun. His mother set his targets and he proceeded to shoot each one with the different guns. His accuracy was superb and he could hit a target that was about a mile out. Soon he finished with the range and headed towards the main training room. Kushina stood on the other side with a wooden bakken in hand. Let's see how much you have improved, she said. Naruto nodded. He pulled a staff from the weapon rack and stood to face her. His feet were spread shoulder-width apart, his hand held the staff with about a foot between them. One end of the staff was pointed at Kushina and Naruto smiled. Bring it, he said, and Kushina charged. She brought the bakken down at his head and he blocked with the middle of his staff. He pushed her back, then swung one end of the staff towards her right side. She blocked, and kicked him, only for him to block with the other end of his staff. She pushed off of it and used the momentum to spin, and bring the bakken towards his side. Naruto blocked it, but the force behind the attack caused him to stumble a bit. Kushina pressed her advantage and started to attack her son with as much force as she could. Naruto blocked her attacks and tried to look for an opening, but he saw none. He blocked her next attack and jumped back, creating space so he could breathe, but Kushina wouldn't have it. She rushed her son and knocked the staff away. But, as she tried to strike him with her bakken, he sidestepped her and hit her in the stomach with a palm strike. Kushina had the wind knocked out of her and Naruto pressed his attack. He used quick and precise strikes to push Kushina back, not giving her time to raise her weapon. He went for a strike to her stomach, only for her to drop the bakken and grab his arm. She flipped him over her back and he landed hard on the ground. She quickly turned and held the bakken to his neck. I win, she said with a smile, while Naruto looked up at her with a frown. I get you next time, he said as Kushina helped him off the ground. They headed towards the main lab and Naruto went to his room to change. As he exited his room he felt the building shake. Naruto ran back into the lab area and headed towards the main entrance, only for Kushina to come and stop him. Go to the vault, she ordered. Why? He asked, hoping he didn't already know the answer. It's happening again, Kushina said, making his eyes go wide. Mom, you need, he started, but Kushina pushed him towards the vault. But mom, he started to say, but she wouldn't have it. Go into the vault, she said and pushed him inside. Mom, just stay in the vault. She said, I can't lose you. Naruto just looked at her and nodded. She watched as the vault door closed, her son looking on. Naruto turned to the vault screen and looked around. He saw the freedom sitting there in front of him. He wanted to give it to Kushina, but she wouldn't listen to him. He walked in front of the creation. Why can't I help? He cried as he sat down on the ground, in front of the is. I built you, but no one can use you. I hate this. He looked up at the freedom and put his hand onto it. Suddenly he felt a shock and his head was filled with information. Soon a bright light filled the room. Outside, Kushina was fighting off 3 is, they seemed to have the advantage over her. She was still using the Zaku, so she was at a disadvantage. Hers was an early, Generation 2 while the enemy was flying new, Generation 3 machines. She was firing at one of the is but was hit from behind by a blast. She fell to the ground as her shields fell below 100. Give it up. One of the pilots said, taking aim at her. Oh no, she said, and waited for the enemy to blast her, but nothing came. She watched as the enemy is looked towards the lab as an explosion filled the air. The sounds of thrusters filled the air and suddenly, 6 lasers sped towards the 3 enemy is. As the scattered, one was hit by a large blur and pushed towards the ground. The new is turned and fired 4 blasters at the grounded is, knocking it out of the fight. The other 2 is came out of the shock, and quickly attacked the new enemy. The black and blue is activated its thrusters, making it looks like wings. It flew forward at full speed and pulled out a double-sided beam saber. The two enemies is fired at the charging is, only to be met with a shield blocking their shots. The pilot of the Nu is forced their shield into one of the enemies is and slammed the blade into the other. As the enemies flew back, it gave Kushina enough time to recharge her shields and enter the fight. She flew towards the enemy as that was hit with the shield, and brought her axe out. Before the pilot could get its bearings, Kushina slammed her axe into its shield, knocking them down lower and lower, till the is stopped moving. She turned to look at the two battling is and saw the enemy is fall to the ground. Kushina smiled and opened a channel with the black and blue is. Thanks for the help, she said. Not a prob, the pilot said. The voice shocked Kushina. Naruto, is that you? The is turned and she saw her son looking at her with a smile. Yeah mom, it's me. She looked at her son with shock. He was piloting an is, but one she had never seen. Naruto, what is that? Naruto just smiled. This, mom, is the freedom, he said with a huge smile on his face. SB. Naruto walked down a hallway with his mother. He was wearing a black suit with a white dress shirt and orange tie. He hated wearing something like that, but it was something Kushina insisted on. They were heading towards a meeting with the President of the United States. Naruto was nervous and didn't know why he was there. He just wanted to go back to the lab and work on the freedom. They sat down and waited for the president to speak. He smiled at them. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for having us, Kushina said with a smile. He smiled back, then looked at Naruto. You might be wondering why I have called you here today. I am, Naruto said, but Kushina kicked him. Ow. I have an idea, Kushina said. Well then let's get to the point, the president said. I am happy to announce that we are sending your son to the IS Academy. Naruto looked at him with confusion on his face. Say what? We are sending you to the IS Academy, the president said again, as Naruto just stared at him in shock. What? Do you think that we would just leave the second male that can pilot an IS, just sit there and do nothing? What do you mean second? Naruto asked, but was ignored. Kushina just sighed and shook her head. When is the capability test? I was hoping for later on today, the president replied, and Kushina just nodded her head. She stood up, and Naruto followed her out the door. They were led by one of the president's advisors to a large stadium in the back. They stopped in the locker room so Naruto could change into his suit. It was black and fitted his form. If any girls his age would have seen him like that, they would have drooled over his toned upper body. As he finished changing, he went to the IS launching area. He entered and saw the freedom, ready to be boarded. Kushina stood by its side, giving him a smile. You'll do fine, she said, and he smiled. Fine, he said and activated the freedom. He stood tall and ready to launch. He watched as the launch bay doors opened and he flew out. He floated onto the field and looked for his opponent. He saw no one inside. Hello. He then heard the sound of thruster fill the air and saw a Raffle Revive fly out towards him. He watched as the pilot came closer and blushed when she came into view. She was beautiful, with short green hair, and glasses that held bright green eyes. Naruto couldn't stop staring at her. She flew towards him and stopped a few feet in front of him. Hello, she said with a smile that made Naruto blush even more. Hi, Naruto said, trying to hide his emotions. The girl noticed his blush and blushed as well. Suddenly a voice filled both comm channels. Okay, the test will be starting soon, the voice said, obviously female. The test is being administered by Maya Yamada, her opponent, and test taker is Naruto Namikaze. Do your best, both of you. The voice cut out and the Maya stared at her opponent. She smiled. Do your best, she said. Naruto was about to nod when he saw Maya level a gun at him. Naruto instantly went into battle mode, and lifted his shield to block the incoming barrage of shots. He lifted his rifle and returned fire. Maya dodged the shots, changed her weapon to 2 machine guns, and started to send another barrage of bullets at Naruto. He dodged to the side and flared his wings, allowing him to move at his top speed. He flew up towards her shield in front, firing his rifle. Maya stood her ground and kept up her attack only to have him thrust his shield into her, knocking her back. She was surprised by the tactic, but her eyes widened when she saw 2 shoulders and hip blaster leveled at her. He smiled then fired. She didn't have time to dodge and was hit full on by the attack. Her shield dropping dangerously low, she looked at him and saw that he was still pressing his attack. She pushed her thruster to maximum and dodged as he fired at her. She switched her weapons to a grayscale battering ram and a combat knife. She thrust the battering ram at Naruto's shield, knocking it out of his hands. Damn, Naruto said and tried to back up, but Maya pressed her attack. She used the combat knife to stab his shoulder. She then proceeded to ram his energy shields till a hiss was heard, signaling he was out of energy. Naruto fell to the ground and looked up at Maya. Damn. She smiled at him and deactivated her is. She landed on the ground and offered her hand to him. You did a very good job, she said, making him blush. You had me on the ropes with that last attack. He took her hand and she pulled him up. Yeah, but I still lost, he said with a sad smile, but I will get you next time. Is that a challenge? She asked with a smile. For someone as pretty as you, yes it is, Naruto said with a big smile. Maya blushed and was about to reply, when a beautiful woman with black hair and an amazing figure walked towards them. That enough flirting you two, she said, and the pair blushed. She looked at Naruto and he looked back at her, trying not to blush. You did well enough for an idiot. Hey, I am not an idiot, he said, getting angry. Yes you are, the black-haired lady said. You blasted her with your 4 blaster but gave her time to recover. You need to press your attack more. Naruto wanted to say something, but knew she was right. I know that, he said with a little anger in his voice. Good, there is hope for you yet, she said and walked away. Maya looked at Naruto and smiled. See you at school, she said, and followed the black-haired lady. Kushina walked over to her son and put a hand on his shoulder. You did great, she said, and gave him a smile. Thanks mom, he replied, letting his anger show. But I don't appreciate being called an idiot by her, he said, gesturing to the departing form of the black-haired lady. Well, she does have the right, you know, Kushina replied. What do you mean? Naruto asked. That is Chifuyu Orimura, she was one of the best pilots in the world, Kushina said, and walked away. Naruto stood there dumbfounded. He shook out of his surprise and headed after his mother. S.B. A girl with purple hair had watched the fight and was fascinated by Naruto's is. It was truly a very well-designed machine, but what surprised her the most was that the pilot was the one who designed it. She watched her monitors and froze the screen, zooming in on Naruto's face. This one is truly one to watch, she said with a smile. Tabane Shinanano had found someone that interested her beside Ikika, Chifuyu, and her sister Huki. This is the end of the video. Hope you enjoy the video and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. Till then, bye.